Welcome to Bankole's Nation. I'm your host, Bankole Thompson, and thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode. Our guest is Robin Kinloch, the First Lady of Triumph Church, where Reverend Solomon Kinloch serves as the senior pastor. Of course, Reverend Kinloch is one of two candidates vying to become the next mayor of Detroit. Reverend Kinloch is running against Mary Sheffield, the president of the Detroit City Council. Who is Robin Kinloch? What are the issues she cares about? What's her take on the 2025 Detroit mayor's race? We have the interview coming up right after this break with Robin Kinloch, the spouse of Reverend Solomon Kinloch. We're also launching this week, of course, a best commenters section. If you comment and make a perspective, share a perspective, a unique perspective, we will look at your comments, and of course, you'll get a free autographed copy of my latest book, Fiery Conscience. And of course, if your comments fit the bill, we'll send you an autographed copy of my latest book, Fiery Conscience. So when you listen to the podcast, feel free to make comments. We'll be reading all of your comments, and it fits the bill of what we're looking for, the best commentary on the podcast itself. We're going to send you a free autographed copy of Fiery Conscience. Coming up right after this break, Robin Kinloch, the First Lady of Triumph Church, is here for the interview. Stay with us right after. Let's welcome to this week's edition of our weekly podcast, Bankole's Nation. Robin Kinloch is the First Lady of Triumph Church and, of course, the spouse of Reverend Solomon Kinloch, one of two candidates running for the mayorship of Detroit. It's Reverend Solomon Kinloch and Mary Sheffield, the president of the Detroit City Council, who are vying for the top spot in the city in November. Robin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for sharing your platform. I have so much respect for the work that you do. I was listening to one of your podcasts when you were talking about the unfair and bias, how biased the media has been in representing my husband. And one of the things you talked about was his brother's DUI. And I'm so grateful that you brought that up, because I was shocked to see my husband's face under any caption with DUI, because he doesn't even drink. But thank you for just, providing a space for fair, informative, and, knowledgeable and truthful coverage during this campaign season. So I appreciate you sharing this space with me.
No doubt. You're welcome anytime. I want to begin by, for many people perhaps who know you from a distance, don't know you, have not been in your space. They've seen Reverend Kinloch on the campaign trail out there, in the Black Club meetings and churches and having these town halls, but they've never come into your space. I want you to talk to them, though. Let's talk about who is Robin Kinloch. Let's demystify the First Lady of Triumph Church, who could be standing on the threshold of being the First Lady of the city.
Which would be an absolute honor to represent Detroiters in any capacity, but certainly using my platform to elevate, our community. I am, first and foremost, I believe I would say I'm a child of God. I am, to your point, I am the wife of Pastor Solomon Kinloch Jr. I'm a mom. I grew up on the east side, started out at the Warren Encounter Project, and transitioned, and we moved over on Bessemer in the Harper Gratiot area. I am a graduate of Osborne High School, class of 92, go Knights. I have worked in the city of Detroit, rite of passage. I worked at Daimler Chrysler. I worked at GMAC, worked at McDonald's on Gratiot and French Road. So I am definitely Detroit. I'm east side, So when my husband and I connected, of course, everyone who's from the city knows there's sometimes a little battle, and he'll shout out the west side, but I always got to give a shout out to the east side. And, grew up in extreme poverty and my parents could not raise my brother and I. And so it really took a village, a community to pour into us and to make me the person that you see before you today. But it was that sense of community, responsibility, compassion, kindness that linked Pastor Kinloch and myself. And because we have that shared responsibility, we've been able to thrive in the area of ministry, and that's solely because we've trusted God and we love people enough to stop and do whatever we can to provide relief
Mhm.
in areas in which we know so many Detroiters and people are facing in different seasons of their lives.
Yeah, and I want to get into the poverty issue, but let's stay with the Warren Connor projects. It's amazing though that you have coming out of the projects of Detroit on the east side to becoming the first lady of the largest church in Michigan, one of the largest black churches in the nation. And now you are on the threshold of potentially becoming the first lady of the city of Detroit. Looking back at your life, reflect on that a little bit, though, in terms of what it means for you now where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So, being a woman, being a mother, I know that I lend a lot of shared connection with a lot of women. We just launched our Women for Kinloch initiative on the 6th, and there were a lot of like-minded women in mind, body, and spirit. But that connection of knowing what it's like to juggle the everyday ills of life, right? You
Right,
know, oftentimes when we're in a space and God is gifting us and we're growing and we become parents and we become spouses, we don't look at the other side of the coin. And, for instance, childcare. Childcare is such an essential for so many mothers that
right,
for us to look at it in a lens where we view it as a luxury instead of a necessity is really insensitive and irresponsible in a lot of instances. One of the things, so often we find these political solutions, if I can
right.
say that, but because the work and the lack and the insufficiency isn't birthed out of politics, it's birthed out of experience. That's one of the reasons that it's so important to have someone in leadership that not only can connect because of what they heard, but they feel your pain. They know what you're going through because they've been in that same space at one time or another in their own lives. And I feel as though now Detroit is in a space where Detroiters deserve change. They deserve a person in leadership who is going to make people the priority in this next administration. I am the first to say that, downtown needed a revitalization, but it can't revitalize to such an extent that we have now forgotten about people. And your article today in the news where it touched upon
Right,
so many people being in poverty. And so,
right.
what does that comeback look like if we're not investing in the very people that make this city great? A good playground isn't as good to people who are afraid to send their kids there to play on it because it's not safe or
Mhm.
because we haven't done what we needed to do as far as an administration, as far as a community, and to ensure the safety of our young people and alleviate some of the burden that mothers face every day when they're making those decisions as to what to do with their children. I mean, I can recall just a snow day.
Mhm.
Moms are scrambling to figure out, okay, if school is closed, who am I calling in to work because I'm not going? Am I working from home? Is that an option? Do I have to have grandma or someone in my village come over and sit with you? Do I have to take you over someone's house? And so there are so many things and so many challenges and so many obstacles that women are facing. I feel as though God has uniquely positioned me in this space to have the compassionate ear, not just to listen, but to be activated so that we can alleviate some of the burdens that women face every day.
It's very interesting you're saying this, Robin, because I've had a front row seat on these issues in this town for a long time, and I have not seen. I can tell you this: I have not seen a first lady in Detroit in decades or in years who is speaking in this space and speaking the way you're speaking in terms of issues that women, are dealing with, childcare, like you said. And of course, my column in today's paper, Detroit is the highest poverty city in the nation right now for cities that have a population of 500,000 or more. So, I mean, that means that we are, in fact, in the belly of the beast. And most of the people in the belly of the beast are women. And someone has to give voice to their issues.
I know that that was not a surprise to people who live in the neighborhoods every day. I think the numbers just provide clarity about
Hmm.
something that we already know that exists. I know it from the seat that we have from a ministry perspective when we see so many women that are in need and they're crying out for help. We had two young children earlier this year. Darnell was 9, Amelia 2. Uh,
Yes.
their mom, yeah, those two kids passed away. We all knew the headlines at the in the
I went to the
casino
funeral
garage.
at your church. Pastor Kenloch gave the eulogy. It was a very moving funeral.
Very moving, but it really pierced the conscience of the city from the perspective that this mother, Miss Williams, had reached out to the city for help. And so
Yes.
a lot of times you'll see women or you'll see people who are suffering and they're suffering in silence. She reached out for help. Unfortunately, the help of housing security came at the expense of two of her young children. She has since been provided housing by the
Yeah.
city, but those two lives were
Actually,
lost.
the housing was provided by the Detroit Rescue Mission Ministries, not the city. So, and I know
Okay,
the Rescue
listen.
Mission. I know the Rescue Mission Ministry as well. I mean, they've used my name to raise funds in the past. So the house was provided by Dream, the Detroit Rescue Mission Ministries, not the city of Detroit. But go ahead.
Well, I know she reached out to the city.
Right,
Listen,
right, yeah,
get me straight. But I say that to say she did reach out
hmm,
for help. Unfortunately, the resolve didn't come until after she had to bury
yep,
two of her children. And those are stories that we need to hold on to because we should never take for granted that people are just going to figure it out. I think this idea that people aren't struggling or they're bad people because they're trying to make ends meet from paycheck to paycheck is really an unfair picture that sometimes we paint, that sometimes we're lazy, we don't want anything, we don't want more. When I'm out here campaigning in particularly or even through ministry, people are sharing with me, I had a good job, I had a job, making
hmm,
70 or $80,000 a year. I lost my job. We know that now under the Donald Trump administration, over 300,000 women have lost their jobs under this administration. So this is not oftentimes no fault of their own. It's a situation they find themselves in. And oftentimes people aren't looking for you to give them a fish. They're looking for you to help them until they're fishing again. So people want to be independent. This
right.
notion that people want to be dependent on the system or someone else is just an unfair characteristic that is sometimes portrayed about our people that is just certainly not true.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you're hitting it right on the head there because I think sometimes poor people get accused of, like you said, being wanting to be dependent when people just want to know how to learn how to catch a fish, right? And that way they can also become fishermen and fisherwomen and so forth. But I wanna delve quickly to Reverend Kenloch, the candidate here. If you can talk to our audience about the ministry that he has led at Triumph and how that connects to this campaign. Because we have not seen, perhaps in a very long time, where a mayoral candidate, who's a one of two front runners, comes out of the church in Detroit. And I think for this, it has shocked a lot of people, surprised a lot of people. And of course, I'll be the first to tell you, there are some folks who are just haters. They just don't like the fact that Reverend Kenloch is running. I understand and I get that. But talk about you've witnessed that ministry at Triumph Church firsthand under his leadership. Talk about that and how it connects to this campaign and the larger importance of people that you're trying to get to vote for him in November.
Absolutely. So I have been loved by Pastor Kinloch for over 20 years. I know this man, um, and I know what he stands for. I believe that the rest of Detroit, on a larger scale, got a glimpse of how intentional and how intense he is when it comes to serving people when COVID hit, right? We
Hmm.
had always been doing scholarships. We had been giving away cars. We had grocery programs. We had been feeding in the community. We had already been doing the work for a number of years. But I shared this story with a group of women in our for our launch for Kinloch for Women for Kinloch, and I said to them, I said, I remember it like it was yesterday. We got a call saying that the governor is going to go on with a press conference and she's getting ready to close the schools. This was on a Sunday. I can remember it like it was yesterday.
Hmm.
And I recall so vividly, he was in prayer and he said to my son and I, he said, listen, we're going to pray about this, but at 4 o'clock in the morning, we're going to be up and we're going to the church. She had closed down everything.
Hmm.
And in my carnal mind, I said, Lord, he's going to kill us. And the first thing they're going to say is he's always doing too much because that is sometimes associated
Right.
with his name because he does a lot for people because he cares just that deeply.
Yeah.
And we did just that. We got up 4 o'clock in the morning. We went to the church, and he couldn't. When I tell you, Bankole, he was pacing. He couldn't wait for business hours to open because he was calling every connection he had. He was calling the grocery stores. He was calling Meyer, who we have been a partner with for a very long time. And so it was that type of leadership that gave us, an entryway into purchasing bulk food. And so he told the members of Triumph Church, our community is depending on us now in these uncertain times like they've never depended on us before. And we were able to partner with those initiatives and we were able to open our church that was once a monthly food pantry to a daily food pantry with three people, myself, Caden, and Kinloch, because we didn't know it was, of course, if you recall that time, we didn't want to put other people in harm's way,
That's true.
told our staff, if you're
Right.
uncomfortable, work remotely. But it was that type of action. I remember him being on the call with some of the leaders in our state, and I remember him saying to them, you can't close the schools because who's going to feed those kids that were depending on that breakfast and that lunch that is
Yeah.
sometimes their dinner? What are we doing with the families who won't have food because the parents work hourly jobs? They're not salary employees. It's so much uncertainty. And advocating with such passion and such conviction that it caused the rest of the city and the state and the nation to take notice as to what this
Mm.
church and this pastor was willing to do in a time that we had not ever seen before. Um, when it came to feeding, of course, we talk about the digital divide and the
Right.
laptops. He was advocating for the people because he knows what it's like to be in a space where you don't have the means and that you need someone to advocate for you. You need someone to be compassionate. You need someone to be sensitive, and you need someone to act on your behalf so that there is a resolve. That's to me is what leadership is. That's what leadership does. He doesn't come, from a family where he had a silver spoon. Neither do I. But that sense of urgency and to communicate, the courage to communicate that sense of urgency to the governor, to the mayor, caused a pause for them to reevaluate the plan and to
Mm.
prioritize people before we just start shutting down buildings. I mean, when we talk about funerals, the church, we
Mm.
held funerals every day, maximum capacity, 10 people. We didn't have volunteers, so it wasn't the regular course of business where
Right.
ushers distributing obituaries. But for those families, us being able to offer free funerals to them would provided them a closure that
Mm-hmm.
they weren't able to get in any other arena, although it was 10, 10 people capacity. But
Right.
when we offered that, we were doing funerals Monday through Friday, Monday through Friday.
Wow.
And we were had a company in coming in, sanitizing, ensuring people were safe as much as possible. And so you really, for me, because I have an up close and personal
Yeah.
to the work that he's done, getting up in the middle of the night, advocating for people, when the unions were on strike, he was the first person to call and say, what do we need to do to support these families? I have relationships with Myers, with Mike's Grocer on Livernois. I have relationships with some of the caterers who wanted to stay open, wanted to get jobs. They were looking for opportunities to support. Let's partner with them to make sure that those families are supported during this difficult season, right? So there are people that want to say that, you know, well, he doesn't have the experience. I don't know what more experience you need than being in those same similar situations and being
Yeah.
an effective advocate for Detroiters. And so I find myself on this campaign trail often saying Detroiters deserve more. We deserve change. We deserve someone in this season, in this election, who is going to prioritize people. They find money for everything else. It's time for us to shift our priorities and start investing in our community in a different way. And I believe in that different way, we're going to see a different resolve. We're going to
Right.
see crime decrease because people are given opportunities to do something different.
Yeah. Yeah. Robin, I want to talk about there's a segment, there's always people who, when you talk to them about supporting a candidate running for mayor or governor, they'll say, well, what's going to change? Nothing is going to change. My situation hasn't changed. And so you have a segment of voters who obviously have to be activated. They have to be given a reason to come out and vote. And Dr. King talked about that, in his crusades during the civil rights movement, that black folk have to have a reason for which to vote. Talk to that community though, in terms of why you think Kinloch Solomon Kinloch is a different candidate, and why they should come out and vote for him, because we do have what we call in Detroit the silent majority, and most of these folks will tell you legitimately and justifiably so that our lives have not changed. They'll tell you, well, the last 3 terms of the Mayor Duggan administration, we've not seen the mayor in our neighborhood. We've seen him on TV about downtown. We've seen him doing the ribbon cutting, about the big developments coming downtown, the major investors. We've seen him at the Mackinac Policy Conference, but he's never walked our neighborhood. I mean, my column in the Detroit News today, I asked the mayor to go spend several days in a homeless shelter so he can get out of the bubble and see what it feels like to be homeless, what it feels like to be poor. Maybe he should have been attending some of those COVID funerals so he can see what it feels like for people to be in their darkest hour. So talk to that community of voters in Detroit who don't have a reason for which to vote.
I think the work speaks for itself. I think when I'm out in the community and I'm campaigning and and I'm sharing and I'm advocating for Solomon to be the next mayor for the city of Detroit, and I talk about some of the things that have taken place, 9 times out of 10, people are familiar with the work and they'll
Mhm.
say, you know what? He was doing that when he wasn't on the ballot. He was doing that when he didn't show up in this space. He was doing that because at one point he was receiving all of these accolades for the work and accomplishments that he's done over the years from some of these same, media outlets that now say that, this isn't territory that he should be navigating through. But the people know the work, right? They know the work that is associated with the church. They know that for over 27 years, he's been doing this work. And a lot of times what I'm hearing is, and what I'm hoping that the voters will become engaged in, is because if he cares that much about people, he's just trying to broaden the net. And if you
Right.
broaden the net, you're going to bring more people into the fold. And chances are you're going to feel the effects of change. We've not had change as it relates to this mayor in 12 years, but my husband's opponent has been a part of that 12-year regime that has not prioritized people. And so at some point, the candidates will talk about what that change has looked like and how that change has affected the lives of other people. And I think when we look at the track record of both of these candidates, it is clear the one that will prioritize people because he has a connection to people, because he has been in the same place that a lot of these people still reside in. And he has he's a trusted voice in the community, but he's going to be courageous to stand up for the rights of Detroiters. And I know that he's going to do the work in a way and in a transformative way that we have not seen in recent years in leadership in the city of Detroit.
Let's talk about the poverty rate in the city for a minute because you brought it up and of course we mentioned it. But talk about your opponent here, Solomon's opponent, Mary Sheffield, the president of the Detroit City Council. Do you feel that she has to answer for these poverty numbers as well, given that she's been in power the same time as Mike Duggan has been in power, 12 years?
Absolutely. If for no other reason, why had we not been tracking it until now, until this news report came in? I don't believe that we hit this level of poverty with like a light switch on and off. These numbers should have been being tracked along the way to tell us when we were moving in the wrong direction before we figured out that we are where we are today. So, yes, I think everything works on metrics. I do think that that there's some accountability that has to take place in any area where we're unsuccessful, just like accolades take place in areas in which we have been successful. So, I know the knife cuts both ways.
Yeah, you've talked about the fact that Solomon has received Reverend Kenloch has received accolades from media and folks in the past, but for some reason they don't want him in the mayor's office. Why do you think that's the case?
I think that some people are afraid of what they will lose. And the reality is, he has stated time and time again that Detroit would be open for business. He's not trying to take away any chairs from the existing table, but
Right.
he is definitely going to add chairs to the table to ensure that we're talking to the residents, that the residents are a part of the plans that are moving forward, and that we're not making decisions for people in their neighborhoods without having conversations with them prior to ensure that what we're implementing is actually what they want, require, or need. We have to allow people that are in this space to feel as though they have a voice that will not lie on deaf ears, that they're going to have someone that's in constant communication with them, not just during election season, but they're in constant communication with them because they care about improving their lives.
Yeah, and my mind still goes back to the funeral at the church at Triumph Church, the Corey kids, I call them. And it makes you wonder how many of those other situations are out there.
Mhm.
I don't believe that was an isolated incident. How many of those other situations are out there where people have called the city of Detroit for help and got no help? And this is coming from me, Robin. Like I said, I attended that funeral, and I felt like Mike Duggan should have been at that funeral. He was not at that funeral. I felt that was unacceptable. That was, Carlos' indifference. That was cruel, in my opinion. He should have been at that funeral. Any mayor of any city where you have two kids in your city die in the cold winter in a vehicle because they had no home to be. Any mayor that is worth his or her salt should have been at that funeral, but Mike Duggan was not at that funeral. And to me, that raised a lot of questions. But I want to stay within the parameters of my initial remarks, and that is how many of those stories could be out there. And I want you to speak to that because when we look at some of those situations, we find a lot of women who find themselves in that space. Dr. King says it's almost like being trapped in the corridors of poverty with no exit sign. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we see it, of course, through the area of ministry. The church is known, it's branded as a community church. I
Right.
just spoke with a woman last week and she was talking to me about her water bill. So it's ironic that we were talking about the water bill. And she said, my
Mm.
water bill is so high. She said, and I called the city and they asked me if I had put in a swimming pool. And she said, a swimming pool? I could barely afford to take a shower. I'm bathing both of my kids at the same time.
They should ask the billionaires that question, not that lady, but go ahead.
And so,
Or they
um,
should ask Mike Duggan the question. I don't know. But anyway, go ahead. Go
but
ahead,
she
Robin
said
Kinloch.
the level of insensitivity to the plight that she found herself in. She said, I really want Pastor Kinloch to win this election because even if I'm not able to get relief from my water bill, at least I know I'm sharing my story with someone who cares. And I think that piece of compassion and kindness and understanding and advocacy is so far removed for some people. It's hard, to your point, it's hard for them to get engaged and really be able to see that change is even possible. So often political solutions, when we talk about what happened with the Curry kids, political solutions, I'm sure there was something in place. I would like to think there was something in place, but
Mhm.
because of insufficiency and lack, we're looking to political solutions.
Right.
But really, these are exercises in life. And if
Mhm.
we are so a part of the problem that we can't see the solution, we can't see where we need to navigate, we can't see where we need to do something different, then we got to move out of the way and allow someone in the space who can see, who's not so close to the forest that they can't see the trees, who's willing to have bold, courageous, out of the box initiatives that we want to say are impossible. I just told some women on a call earlier today that, I need them to channel their inner Harriet Tubman because she was courageous. She was a woman of faith. She had vision
Right.
and she kept going back. It wasn't convenient. It was not comfortable. She didn't have to go back. But here we are over 200 years later, still talking about the effect that she had on our people, the commitment she had to freedom. I was at a event earlier this year at Wayne State. They held an event where they were talking about former mayors, and it was Coleman Young, and they were talking about just a little snippet
Right.
of what each administration offered and some of the successes and some of the failures. And I was talking to Larry Simmons, and Reverend Simmons, for those who don't know, his son Jamal Simmons is a
Right.
political commentator. And one of the things Reverend Simmons said to me, he said, poverty has been a noose around the neck of the city of Detroit, and no mayor has been willing to tackle it. And I told those women today, this is why I need you to channel your inner Harriet Tubman and be bold and persistent, because we are going to loosen the noose, if not tear it down, break it apart, so that our people can be freed, they can be liberated, and they can enjoy a better quality of life than the one that they experience today.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, I hear you, and I think that's the number one issue affecting Detroit is poverty. There is no other issue that is greater. Forget all these investments, and I've said this, I want you to talk about this as well, and that is the kids in Detroit. If the kids have no future, there is no future in this city. Half of these kids in the city of Detroit live in abject poverty, and we see that day in and day out. And we've not had a mayor's race in the past where the focus has been on child poverty. I want you to talk about that because I think those issues need to be front and center of this mayor's race.
I totally agree.
I mean, you're coming from the Warren County projects.
I'm coming from the Warren County projects, not from a traditional family. So my parents could not raise my brother and I. And so I depended on wraparound services even when I didn't know I needed wraparound services. You know, two toddlers in diapers, the community, that senior building that we lived in, they sent extra food and extra snacks to our unit. They sent, you know, their hand-me-downs of their kids and their grandkids, they sent those our way so that we would be properly clothed, properly nourished. We have to have that type of leadership during this time so that we're providing wraparound services. It's not good enough to send kids to school if they are hungry. How are they able to learn? If they have housing insecurity, if they're sleeping in a garage. I mean, one thing about Darnell Curry, he was still showing up to school. So
Hmm.
if they're
Yeah,
sleeping in a
yeah.
garage
I mean,
before they're going to school,
his schoolmates showed up at the funeral. They
is
came there, yeah.
yes, the he was
His
on the football
classmates, yeah.
team. The
Yep. The
football
football
team
team, yep.
carried his small casket out with them. And so those wraparound services are essential so that we're not kicking the can down the road, that we're having interventions in place so that we can partner with the schools. How can we partner with this family to ensure that this child is a success, irregardless of their current circumstances? It's possible. I'm a product of that, so I know what that looks like. You know, I have a law degree. I'm not an attorney, but I have a law degree from Western Michigan's Cooley Law School. I have a doctorate degree from Wayland Theological Seminary. I didn't have parents involved in my life. So, absent parents, absent a traditional setting, when family structure looks different, we should still be able to navigate through a system, provide support for young people because they aren't the leaders of tomorrow. In a lot of instances, they're the leaders today. They just have untapped potential. And a lot of times when we see them doing crimes or getting into mischievousness, it's because we haven't done a great job of keeping them busy and putting them in spaces where they'll be empowered, where they'll be successful, and where we will see change.
All right, I got two more questions for you, Robin Kenloch. About 3 years ago, I attended a Detroit City Council hearing, and I actually recorded it. And I remember this lady came up and she was speaking. She had 2 or 3 kids with her. She's been living in a very dilapidated home. She's been calling the city for help, no help. Landlord, acting the fool and so forth. But she came to city council meeting and she was crying during the hearing. She said, I came, I've called, I've gotten no help. There are a lot of women out there, Robin, and this is not fiction, this is a reality. There are a lot of women out there who are living with their kids in dilapidated homes. And no, Dr. King said, no exit sign, and they have nowhere to go. And their issues are not being brought up to the fore. I want you to talk about that in terms of should you become the first lady of Detroit, how important would it be for you to champion those kinds of issues? And given that sister who showed up at city council saying, I need help, I've been living in a dilapidated home that is not even healthy for my kids, to give voice and help empower them.
Again, you know, we can't kick the can down the road. It's funny that you mentioned that because we literally in one of our community conversations, a senior brought this up to us about having the resources to fix up her home. I don't want to move. I don't, this is my home. I need some assistance. And so what she shared with us is that she was told there are resources out there. She should qualify for those resources. But
Mhm.
then what happens? You get this invisible, infamous urban legend red tape, right? So you should have
Yeah.
completed the form in black ink. You completed it in blue ink. You should have highlighted your name on page 2. You didn't do that. And so there are all of these hurdles that are meant to keep us in a space where we're not able, in some instances, to take advantage of the opportunities that is suggested that are available to people. I hear all the time with business owners or people who aspire and want to open up businesses, the middle class who want to acquire property. They'll say, you know what? It just doesn't feel like the same access, how that it's so difficult for us to maneuver. It takes 70, I think someone told me 77 steps for
Mhm.
me to complete the paperwork and become a business owner, where I feel as though someone from out of state comes in, they like what they see, and they're walked through the process.
Right.
Why isn't that same administration
And
assistant?
they're giving ice cream while they're walking through the process too. I'm adding that there, but go
They
ahead,
didn't
Raven.
say they were getting any ice cream. But the perception, which is oftentimes a reality, is that there's not enough assistance for people to navigate the nuances of the system. We have to have in an administrative capacity people who are subject matter experts who are walking people through so that they're able to take advantage of opportunities that have been communicated, if in fact those opportunities are communicated so that they can take advantage of them. Oftentimes we hear this big announcement, but then I don't know that the data of people who were able to take advantage of whatever is offered in this big announcement really meets the demand. uh I don't
Right.
know, what that data is, but I definitely know there's a gap between what's articulated as opportunity and what's actually taken advantage of as
Right.
opportunity.
Yeah. No, there's a disconnect. I agree with you. As we wind down this interview, we've talked about poverty a lot, economic inequality, injustice, you name it. I want to talk about the middle class, the black middle class, the middle class. You need a strong middle class community for Detroit to thrive as well. They pay taxes and so forth and all of that. So we cannot throw them out. I think that's significant. And when I talk about the middle class, I mean, middle class communities like Boston Edison, East English Village, Palmer Woods, LaSalle Gardens. I mean, you name it. I remember about 4 or 5 years ago, I was invited by the Boston Edison Historic Home Association. They invited me to be their keynote speaker for their annual meeting. And of course, when you invite Bankole, you get what you get. So but anyway, I went down there and I gave them a piece of my mind. They wanted to hear from me. But so I want you to talk to the Boston Edison community, Palmer Woods, LaSalle Garden, East English Village. Those communities, I mean, they're going to vote. They want to hear what Pastor Kinloch is going to do for them. How does Robin Kinloch make that case? Because they're watching.
Yeah, listen, at the heart of it, people want the same thing. They want access, they want opportunity, they want some type of peace, they want to be able to acquire things. And so the middle class is a space where, yes, how do we create for them? Because you're right, they're an essential component to the city of Detroit. How do we create a space for them where they're able to aspire to whatever their next level is, right? Listen, I like nice things. I like a nice vacation. I like a nice car. I like, some nice things as well. But you can't be so in love with what you currently have that you're not willing and you're turning a deaf ear to people who are without. So I feel as though sometimes
Mm-hmm.
so focused on how am I going to acquire, how am I going to acquire, how am I going to acquire, that we turn a deaf ear. But the reality is that if any part of the city is not coming back, it becomes a greater burden on the middle class, whether you want it to be or not.
Right.
And so, what does that look like? That can look like that's not just your resources, that's your time, that's your effort. I mean, the city spent over 200 some $1,000s on the Joe Louis Greenway. We could have impacted, and I don't know enough about the budgeting, but what kind
Right.
of impact would we have had on those who can't afford a book? And I'm not talking about a textbook,
Right.
to empower them so that I'm alleviating the burden that the middle class really carries for the city, because I'm bringing more people along with me. The more people we take out of poverty and get them to the middle class, the better it is for the city
Yeah.
of Detroit. It increases our tax base. So it's a win-win for everyone. Same thing with investors that come in. You got to reach down. You have to be willing to give some of yourself to impact, influence, and uplift this community, because in the end, it is actually beneficial and better for the city as a whole. So I would say to them that Pastor Kinloch, although it may look different, is offering alleviation to you and a pathway for you to move forward from that middle class space because we're bringing along everyone. Everyone is moving up. Everyone is taking a part. Everyone is benefiting. So when he talks about an inclusive Detroit, we're not talking about letting not having relationship with the business community or the middle class in order to save people that are impoverished. We're saying there's an upward mobility plan for everyone if we work together in concert, one beat, one sound, and we're not the tail of two cities. We become the tail of one city that moves everyone forward, and we meet you where you are.
All right. Well said and well put. Thank you so much, Robin Kinloch, the First Lady of the Triumph Church, and of course, the spouse of Reverend Solomon Kinloch, who is running to become the mayor of Detroit. Reverend Kinloch is running against Mary Sheffield, the president of the Detroit City Council. Robin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
All right. You too.